Should I start? Okay. Okay. Where did my gavel go? Good evening. We're going to call to order the June 4th Park Board meeting. Leslie, will you call roll?
Yes. Christie is absent. Hanley.
Here.
Lehrman.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Samirsky.
Here.
Vitale.
Here.
Chair Ingraham.
Here. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes, or does anyone have any comment on the agenda? On the agenda?
And we have no changes to the agenda.
Okay.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Christie is not here. Hanley.
Approve.
Lehrman.
Approve.
Schultz.
Approve.
Samirsky.
Approve.
Vitale.
Approve.
Chair Ingraham.
Approve.
If I could, who motioned that? Hanley. And who seconded that?
I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
So now we'll move to approval of the minutes. First, they're pretty long. Did anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve them.
I'm thankful to the person who typed up 32 pages.
Yes. Is that a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Hanley.
Approve.
Lehrman.
Approve.
Schultz.
Approve.
Samirsky.
Approve.
Vitale.
Approve.
Chair Ingraham.
Approve. Item 5 is citizens wishing to discuss items not on the agenda. I notice we have some people here tonight. Does anyone want to speak? Or no one's on the phone, so I guess we have no one for item 5. Any special matters?
No special matters.
No special matters. Good. So we'll move to number 7, 7A, review of the 2026-2030 Capital Improvement Plan.
Yes, Chair Ingraham and Park Board members. Kelly will walk through the CIP. This is something that we do every year. This is an item that we are looking for feedback and recommendation for approval to the City Council. It will go to the Council, I think in July, probably July.
A couple times, yeah.
Yep, a couple times, yes, before they certify it.
Right.
So
Thank you,
I'll turn
Leslie.
it over.
Good evening, Park Board. As Leslie said, each year the city does a 5-year capital improvements plan. So capital improvements plan is really large ticket items, big projects, big pieces of equipment, things like that. So each year we then bring the Parks and Trails section to you. So this capital improvements plan is a huge document. It's a planning document. When the City Council approves it at the end of December, we actually approve 1 year. So they look at 2026 to make sure we have those projects set, but then it also looks out another 4 years. So that's why we have a 5-year capital improvement plan. We bring you just the Parks and Trails related section, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of sections: major equipment, fire trucks, buildings. So the Willison Center does HVAC equipment and new gym equipment, things like that. But we just bring you the items that are related to Parks and Trails. So we're going to go through those pages tonight. Really, at the end of the night, we're looking for feedback. I think the 2 questions that were in the report were, number 1, is there something in there that you thought maybe shouldn't be in there, or did we miss something? Sometimes, as the year progresses, we get feedback from residents. We look at some of our plans. We look at our post plan, our park master plans, things like that, to try to help gauge what should be included in this CIP. And then secondly, priority. So as you know, as a 5-year plan, we kind of slot things in where we think it best fits. We work with our finance department closely to make sure the numbers add up. But maybe there's something that we have slotted in 2028 that you all feel should be moved up or back. And so those are kind of the feedback questions that we're looking for. Just a couple things as we actually get into, and maybe we can pull up the pages itself. So there's, I think, maybe 20 or so pages that are in this section of the CIP. We can kind of go through them, and I'll just kind of point out the top section is more, you know, we're talking about the total cost over a 5-year program. So this first one is the athletic fields unapproved, which is actually, this one's an unfunded page. So this is not funded, but it talks about the cost over 5 years or longer. It puts them into the, like I said, the Parks, Trails, and Open Space division. It assigns it to a specific city contact, and then it gives it a priority ranking of 1, 2, or 3. Priority rankings, it did list that in the report, but anything with a priority ranking of 1 would be a project necessary for public health and safety. And in our section, we don't have many 1s. We have a lot of 2s and 3s. 2s are really projects that maintain or make existing systems more efficient, and 3 is more about just expanding our system. So in the Parks and Trails section, we see a lot of 2s and 3s, as you could see, or as I think that first page was, this was a 2. So this is an example of a future project, athletic fields improvement unfunded, gives a short description of what this might be. So this is more, anything in the future, we're just thinking about this. And so we just want to make sure it's on the City Council's radar, make sure it's on everybody's radar. And we put that, they were highlighting that 180 out in the future. So this is for potential lighting to the fields over at Lone Lake Park. Just an example of, we have probably 3 or 4 unfunded pages in this section. Yes.
So is the idea that it would be funded, you hope it would be funded in 2031, or that during since it's looked at every year, that it would get bumped up and funded late in 2028, or?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's just the next year out. It's just more of something that we're thinking about for the future. So we don't necessarily know that it's 6 years out or 10 years out. We just have been thinking about that in the future. So we do discuss it. We have not decided to fund it yet. That would be something that if you know, the park board recommended and/or staff thought it was very important, we could recommend to the city council that they do try to fund it in one of those 5 years. But we did not recommend that this year.
Okay, so it's just sort of a placeholder, and we're thinking about this.
Correct.
Stay tuned.
In the future. Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. And we can go to the next one. The next one's actually a funded page. It's the athletic fields improvements funded. So you can see the total value of this page over the 5 years is $330. The one thing that I didn't mention in the first page is we've got 2 line items. We've got the expenditures line item and then the funding sources. So expenditures, what are we actually doing? Are we acquiring land? Is it a construction? Most of ours are construction or maintenance. And then the funding source, the city has a number of different funds. This one and many of our park and trail projects are funded through our Park and Trail Improvement Fund. So this, if you can, we did zoom in, great. So this one highlights some of the things that were happening. So in 2026, remodeling Big Willow concession stand, some fencing in 2027. Darren manages this page, and this is just talks about certain park improvements with athletic fields specifically. I'll just keep going. If you have questions, just stop me, or if you want to see a certain page, we don't have to go through all 20 pages individually either.
What was the priority on this, 2?
This is probably a 2, correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curiosity on the Lone Lake page, the last page. It has lighting for 2 fields. Is the soccer field 2 fields, or what's the second field?
It's 2 soccer fields, correct?
No, one soccer.
One soccer field?
One soccer.
I wonder if we split it to 2 smaller soccer
Yeah,
fields for the smaller
it's
kids.
a big
maybe?
field,
There
so.
are
times
that
it
are
does.
used,
Yeah, I think that's what
but
it
it's
was.
one
Okay, it's one big.
grass
Okay,
space.
that's what I was just curious.
Rectangle space.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So I don't know if we can keep going. The next one is, looks like this is the Cullen Nature Preserve Parking and Trails. This is TBD, dear, or Matt, do you have any specific information on
Yep.
this one?
Thank you, Park Board. Turn my mic on. We're in the process of master planning Cullen Nature Preserve. Currently, we have a draft plan in hand. I've been working closely with the Friends of Cullen Nature Preserve, working with them throughout the process, get their feedback. on master planning requirements for Cullen Nature Preserve to open that to the public and make sure it's as welcoming and as beautiful in terms of ecological restoration as it possibly can be. So we have a draft master plan in hand. But over the winter, late winter, early spring, we went for grant dollars from a state organization called the LCCMR, the Legislative Citizens Commission, Minnesota Resources. So it's an ecological-based grant pool. So we have an application in place for the Cullen Master Plan with that organization, and crossing our fingers, we should hear in the next few weeks whether we get invited to interview to potentially receive those dollars. So the CIP reflects the potential dollars that we would get from that grant partnership. So we've requested $700K from that organization, splitting that over 2 years to roll out the implementation of the Cullen Master Plan elements, trails, parking, boardwalk, features on the site, benches, things of that nature. So we're really waiting to see whether or not we're going to get that funding from this state pool. But in the meantime, we did include some money from our Park and Trail Improvement Fund to at least begin to implement some of the Cullen Master Plan items next year if we do not receive that money from the state pool. We will have to reassess our prioritization to implementing some of those features if we do not get that money for future CIPs in the future. But for now, we needed to apply and let them know that currently we only have $100K available in our CIP, and hopefully that they would understand that we would need the rest of that money to fully implement the master plan as submitted with the grant application.
And is that sufficient for whatever kind of matching they need?
Yes, so this would accommodate the match. Yeah, so it's a big pool of money. It's very competitive. There's statewide requests, dozens and dozens of requests, all nature focused, nature preserve, land acquisitions, river restorations. Our angle is that we're within the metro. We could attract a lot of people to see a very high quality restoration on site. It's not just about the residents of Minnetonka. We're proposing it as sort of a regional draw to see high quality ecological restoration. So crossing our fingers. Yes, Dave.
So, if we were to not get the grant, this is obviously a really important project. Is the total of the CIP dollars we're seeing today the total for parks, or is there ability to move things around in the big budget? To make
We
sure
would
it's
have to
happening?
come back next year with the rest of the CIP request. It's a substantial amount of money.
Okay. But did I hear you right that the city council doesn't actually finalize this until December?
Yeah, so they'll have a meeting here in June where they prep, and then I think
Yeah.
they actually come back in September. So there's a couple meetings before they actually approve the overall city budget in December, correct?
But I read this that we'd like to be working in 2026.
Yes.
So if we don't get the grant and you have to come back in next year's CIP process, then this would get pushed out?
Significant elements of the master plan would get pushed out into the
Or we
future.
could reprioritize money,
Yes.
Well,
right? There's time to
Potentially,
move
yes.
money for next
okay,
year.
good. That's what I was hoping to hear.
It would really hurt our grant chances if we proposed saying we also have CIP money allocated
Yeah,
for
we don't
the
wanna
full
do that.
ask,
Okay,
which we couldn't do at this point. So.
thank you.
The next page is the Glen Lake Park Skate Park and Park. So again, Matt's got this one. This one has a couple different funding sources. Park and Trail Improvement Fund is one of them, but it also has the Community Investment Fund. Community Investment Fund is a fund that the city uses for community projects. Back in 2011, the Williston Fitness Center, when they remodeled, used some of those remodeled dollars were from the Community Investment Fund. This year, in 2025, we actually have dollars for the Ice Arena Refrigeration Project. Some of those dollars are from the Community Investment Fund. So larger community-wide projects that that they have to meet certain criteria to fund. So, Matt, anything on the skate park?
Just at this point, we keep calling it skate park, but the project scoping has evolved a bit. The Glen Lake Activity Center is there, and that's been identified to be raised in the coming year. So we will have a big hole on a very major intersection in our city. So we keep calling this the skate park, but really it's a Glen Lake Park with a skate park element added to it. So the way the parking functions and the Mighty Mites fields is all going to be conceptualized with a skate park being an element. We just realized that it's a very critical park amenity opportunity in the city, Glen Lake there. So we want to recognize that skate park would continue to be an element, but it would be one of the amenities, potentially gazebo space, not a building per se, but more park-like, more welcoming, more trees, green infrastructure associated, less just parking in an old brick 70s building, just more of a community amenity.
And will the design for that come back to the park board?
Yes,
like
it will.
before?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a scope from Damon Farber to begin potentially designing that in the next few weeks here.
Okay.
Is the skate park going to be smaller than we'd originally talked about, or?
TBD, frankly. We were sort of locked in during the skate park feasibility study of the existing skate park location and the existing playground. We got some community pushback about the proposal to potentially move the playground around. So the timing of the Glen Lake Activity Center being proposed to be torn down gives us sort of whole cloth to reinvent a concept for that whole site. So hard to say exactly the finished square foot of the skate park. We would certainly want it to be in that realm of that we have identified through the skate park feasibility study from 2 years ago.
Have the community investment funds been allocated and budgeted already, or do we have to go through an approval process as well with designs and whatnot? 'Cause
So-
that's a big chunk of the money.
Yes. So for 2025, there was design and construction previously allocated of 800,000, and this request would get us up to 300 from the Park and Trail Improvement
Oh,
Fund.
so that 800, so there's 800 in 2025 and 800 in 2026 from community investment?
Just 26.
Just 26.
Yeah, we had some dollars back in 2025 for design work. I can't remember which funding source it was from. I think it was probably from the
It
Park and
reads
Trail
a little
Improvement.
confusing.
Yeah, because it says
It
that
doesn't say that.
800,000 was approved in 2025.
Yeah, it
From
was in
last
this 2025, but we
year's
didn't use it because we weren't ready, so we just shifted it over. It's like a
Oh.
carryover, so the dollars are still there for the
Okay.
project.
Got it.
It's not
As long
1.6,
as it's clear to
it's
city council.
800,000.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And we also did apply for Hennepin County grant. We didn't receive it this year. I think we'll probably try to apply again. There's been talk at the state legislature about funding skate parks.
Yeah.
They're not doing much, so we haven't heard from there. So this is where we're at currently with.
And is there any thinking about the fact that it maybe should be somewhere else? Or is it locked in to be at Glen Lake?
The skate park feasibility study went through the process of identifying this from a trails connection standpoint, adjacency to schools. I think the opportunity of the activity center going away makes it more integral to that whole corner, and frankly, I think we could do a better concept than was laid out in the feasibility study. But we went through that whole process to identify that location.
Yep.
Okay, next page is a big number. It's the Opus Area Park Improvements. That's a TBD. That's over $30 million. You do see that the prior there's 1.45. We actually got state bonding dollars, $725,000. That was a match, so the city had 725, state got 725. So that's that 1.45 that we're using for design work and other things. But future, knowing that the Opus area is going to change. It is changing already, and as light rail comes in, and hoping we can get some green space, $30 million is a big number, but it's hard to say what it would cost for a park out there. Anything to add to that? Or?
We've met with the developer of the Minneapolis Mart late last year. They were still conceptualizing what they're interested in developing on that site. The city doesn't own the parcel of land yet, so we would need to enter into negotiations there. The goal originally was to open a park by the time the light rail's running. That doesn't seem feasible at this point.
Although you never know.
Yeah, good
It
attitude.
depends.
We're really working with the developer who currently owns that land.
So would the land come from the developer?
Yes.
Just present?
No, we'd have
No.
we'd have to use some of our money
Okay.
to buy it. Yes. I just heard today on the news that the Timberwolves ownership group was looking at a variety of sites in the metro, and that was listed. I'm surprised to hear. I don't think it's.
For a new stadium?
Yeah.
No, not for stadium. For stadium?
Timberwolves are looking to move. And I don't know how serious it was, but it was on the ownership group's list of sites. Minneapolis, Mart, Minnetonka.
So then this whole thing would be back to the drawing board?
If the Timberwolves would want to buy it from the developer, it would be out of our
Yeah,
hands.
okay.
It didn't seem very likely. I was surprised to see it, though.
Yeah, that would be, parking would be interesting.
One-way road system through there.
All right, the next one is park and open space purchase. So that's 27,312. One more page there. You can see there is a prior dollar figure there. We actually had almost $1 million, and one of the purchases that the city just made was land down just right next to Big Willow. So there is $500,000 earmarked for 2027 if something were to come up. So
That's what the 983 is. That's
the 983 was used already.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. But we are allocating another 500 in case a property comes up that we would like to purchase. So, next one is the Park Habitat Stewardship Program. Stewardship Plan, $515,000 over the 5 years. I don't know if that's Leslie, maybe.
Yeah, so this is sort of the ongoing restoration planning efforts that we're doing. It's really an offshoot of the Natural Resources Master Plan. If you recall, the plan included a implementation schedule for parks to have restoration occurring. And part of that process is developing plans, which you'll see a few tonight. Once those plans are brought to the park board and we have some community input, then we use capital improvement dollars to actually start to implement those plans. So if you look at the schedule for 2026, if you can go down a little bit, we're scheduled for Victoria Evergreen Park, Kinsel Park, Minnetonka Mills Park, and Civic Center. And this is just for the restoration planning and implementation piece. And so we have funds allocated every year, and so as these dollars continue over the years, they'll be used for restoration projects. Think of kind of a large contracted projects, and then also ongoing maintenance. As we start to do some initial restoration, we'll have to continue to maintain these areas. And so all of that is sort of built into this fund as we go forward.
So eventually, all the parks that are big enough to have restoration would be
Right.
in maintenance.
So, right, and in the implementation plan, in the Natural Resources Master Plan, we have a table, we've prioritized parks. We're just basically working down that list. And sometimes things move around a little bit. If, some of these parks are getting master plans, we want to, our goal is to have the habitat restoration plan in place before the master planning happens. So it's kind of constitutes a planning layer or planning information for that master planning effort. But yes, we are sort of systematically going through our parks.
Can I ask a question, a general overview question about master planning?
Sure.
So, especially for people that are newer and for those of us who probably were told this before and don't remember, is the concept to have a master plan for every park, or where's the cutoff?
The post plan identifies the parks that are either large enough or have a variety enough of amenities in them, ball fields, trails, other items that we would need to essentially survey the community about and potentially prioritize additional funds to add gazebos, upgrade parking. The human use components are involved in those master plans. But no, it's not every park by any means. Most of our parks are smaller and fairly straightforward, and those don't have dedicated CIP dollars.
Okay.
Moving on, next page is the park investment plan. So $1.4 million over the 5 years. A lot of these are playground equipment, tennis courts, safety equipment. Darren, anything specific jump out on this page?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Oops. Nothing out of the ordinary, so it's just planned, replacement of playgrounds is the main thing. So back in 2001, there was a large referendum done to update Minnetonka's parks with the idea that they bonded for this big project to redo the parks between 2002 and 2006 with the idea that, okay, we're going to spend this money to revamp these parks, primarily the ones with playgrounds, and then have it so we don't have to do another one of those. We can just go through our CIP and gradually replace equipment and elements of the parks as they age. So we're just in the process now of starting. We started 4 years ago replacing playgrounds, so we're just continuing on, do generally 2 playgrounds a year, and then to replace that, then do safety like wood fiber and other things in the parks. But
And I assume the schedule is based on the age of the equipment and how fast it.
primarily age and also just the amount of repairs that we're due. So some say one playground might not be as old, but we're having more aging or repairs having to done, so we'll maybe have that one go sooner, even though it's maybe not as old.
And I heard just in a conversation with the general public that it'd be nice to have more playground equipment at Glen Lake by the Mighty Mite Fields, or whatever those fields are called. Should that be funded here, or is that in the Glen Lake plan?
We postponed the upgrade of those playground equipment at Glen Lake, knowing that a park plan was coming down the road. So yes, everything we could fit that the community is asking for on that corner, we're going to try to squeeze it in there.
Okay.
Okay, next, speaking of park planning, that's the next page. So park master planning, so we've got master plans listed from 26 through 29. Matt, anything?
Yes, business as usual. We're going through the park planning process. Big Willow is about to come up. I have a scope in my inbox from Bolton and Mink, who's going to be performing the master plan, big ball fields over at Big Willow, but a lot of ecological restoration. We have the restoration and maintenance plan being presented to you tonight. We'd like to do those in advance of the master planning. A lot of rec groups over at Big Willow that we need to hear input from, as well as, it's a big popular park. So Big Willow's happening this year. Here's the list for future years. Some big upcomers. Lone Lake being a substantial one next year.
So Victoria Evergreen seems smaller. Maybe I'm not measuring it right on the map. It seems smaller than those other ones, and
It's
like
a lesser task, certainly,
Just
because
woods?
it doesn't have athletic fields, for instance, or other demands. It's just one of the bigger parks that the post plan identified for master planning. It'll be a lesser effort than certainly Purgatory or Lone Lake or Big Willow.
Okay, so that's why the dollar amount's smaller. Okay.
At our last meeting, when we were talking about the off-leash areas, there was a discussion around additional off-leash areas to explore, and we talked about whether the master plan line up here is correct if we're looking at incorporating off-leash development in some of these other parks. I think in particular, looking at this list, it was, say, like Lone Lake versus the Civic Center park timing.
These dollars are just consultancy fees to do the
Okay.
master planning. It's not implementation of
But
upgrades.
even so, this would imply that we wouldn't do a master plan, start a master plan for, say, the Civic Center until 2027.
If we identified the need to,
Flip them?
flip them around or push.
So that's still possible
Oh,
as
for
a part of
sure.
this? Okay, I just want to make sure.
These drafts were created months ago at this
Yeah,
point.
okay, I just want to make sure that that's still feasible. And for this year, since you mentioned it, the Big Willow Master Plan is the possibility of the, I'll call it the Minnetonka Corridor for an off-leash area. Is that going to be part of that master plan discussion? Okay.
We would identify to the public that the community work group identified this area as a potential off-leash area and explain the logic behind that and present it to the public for feedback.
Okay.
Purgatory Park Master Plan was kind of our first one. I think we learned a lot over a 12-month process. and you're probably, I'm guessing you've learned from that and you're implementing something, you're probably approaching things a little differently with the ones going forward. And I think it got strength tested about a little bit in our last meeting when we had a big misunderstanding about where the, unleashed dogs were approved or not approved. So I was wondering if you could come back at some point and just say, hey, here's what we learned from the process. Here's how I want to approach master plans differently in the future. Just maybe even just before you do the Big Willow
excellent
one.
idea.
Because I think there's a lot of learning that could be.
Our consultants
Implement.
learned a lot. They took some bumps on the process as well. Extra feedback and extra meetings that they were asked to attend. Those things add up, certainly. So yes, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. There's new things at Big Willow. The rec organizations, the baseball and softball is a pretty serious affair over there. So we'll have new challenges, certainly, but I think we got the gears turning a bit. All the master plans will eventually look similar. They'll all have this planning our parks aesthetic to them, and we'll certainly be learning the lessons, hopefully, as we go.
Okay, we can keep moving. The next one is the Plant Pest Program, 1.16 over the 5 years. Leslie or Matt?
Yes, so this is what we call our forestry fund. So this is funding that is set aside specifically for tree removal and reforestation efforts. Primarily, probably the biggest chunk of this money goes towards responding to emerald ash borer. So as you can see when you drive around the city, we have been significantly impacted. We will be for several years. And so we have had a slight increase in this fund in terms of the expenditures in 2026 through 2027. We'll see where we are in 28 and 29. But for the foreseeable future, we have additional funds that are being requested of the City Council just to help us respond to EAB. So these funds are, this fund I think has been in existence for well over 10 years. And we supplement the money through our operational budget as well. So this isn't solely the only funds we have to address forestry issues. But this is primarily what we use for EAB and will be using for EAB.
And this includes removal and replanting, or just removal?
It includes removal and replanting. Yes. A lot more removal than replanting, though, at this moment.
I know that's the expensive part, right?
And I just want to point out, we do have, this year we received a pretty significant grant from the Department of Natural Resources to fund ash removal on private property. It's called the Relief Grant, and so you may have heard about it. We will be actually applying for additional funds once they become available through the state. It was supposed to be this spring, hopefully this fall. That'll continue to supplement the funds that we have. And then we did actually just found out that we were selected to receive an additional $270,000 from the Metropolitan Council to assist with dealing with emerald ash borer and ash removal. That would be focused on public property. So the other grant was for private property.
So are these dollars, I'm sorry, I know you want to talk, are these dollars for city land?
They are for removing trees on city property and in the right-of-way. Our council policy is that the city will pay for removal of trees in the right-of-way if they pose a risk to the road or trail. We just lost our screen. Not sure what happened. Yes. Yay.
So Leslie, was there in the past a subsidy for private citizens to tap into that grant for their private removal of ash trees in the past? Because other cities have that kind of subsidy.
So we received the grant last year. We've implemented it this year. That is the first time we had funds to fund tree removal on private property. So we have not had any kind of specific fund allocated for private property in the past.
Any of these dollars?
These aren't, no, this is not for private property. The CIP is only for public property, but Just as I said, the right-of-way, which is technically private property, but the city has an easement over the right-of-way, so we have an interest in the right-of-way. And the council policy is that we do pay for removal in the right-of-way. So technically, those are private trees, but they are also, they have implications for the public.
So there will be some sort of announcement or an explanation of how a person might apply for said funds for private trees?
So we had a webpage devoted to applications for people who are interested in applying for the relief grant. Those funds are not available right now. We did expend all of those funds, so we're waiting for additional funds. So hopefully when they become available, hopefully this fall, we'll apply for some more. And if we're successful in receiving it, then it would be open to the public again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next page is the Purgatory Park Red Barn site planning. So as identified in the Purgatory Park Master Plan, get $55,000 for planning and design efforts in 2026.
So this was an item to do at a Purgatory Park Master Planning. This was prior to the off-leash dog conversations, so we've left this page in for now. Adjacent to this site is up for conversation for off-leash area, so we're keep losing our page for some reason. Bit distracting.
Just keep talking.
Just keep talking.
So we have a placeholder in there for a consultant fee to look at what a public use facility, what those potential needs would be met there, how the city would use a site like that, what would be generally affordable for the city. We also have, part of the reason why this is still relevant, regardless of the off-leash dog conversation, is Excelsior Boulevard is getting a trail along the road there, and there's talk about stormwater management potentially occurring on that site, a trailhead or some other sort of parking adjacent to the trail between the high school and out east. So there's additional considerations beyond the Red Barn itself and the off-leash conversation about what that site in Purgatory Park could be used for. So that's what this budget is.
So this is not really to look at the structure
That would be part of this.
and,
So-
but, let me rephrase then. We're not thinking this barn itself can be saved, though, right?
We have a engineering study from about 10 years ago now that had initial costs to salvage the barn and repurpose it, and it was north of $1 million to make it safe to store park equipment in. So we would use some of this money to do an architectural engineering assessment and conceptualize some to-dos with the barn. Could we salvage bits and pieces of it? Just to think it through a little bit.
Okay, and that would also fund whatever was necessary to do with the poor bats that live there?
So I've actually been in touch with DNR bat specialist for about a year or so now, who is very interested in that site, and I was communicating with about helping us install some temporary / permanent bat housing in advance of the barn being raised.
Okay,
So yeah, we're
And-
going to try to take care of them.
good.
So it sounds like we're kind of on hold on this depending on the off-leash discussion. That would presume that the off-leash discussion drives the decision on how that space is used. And whereas if you had a design to how to use that space alternatively, you'd have the ability to compare the two. You follow me? Is that a consideration or not?
I think everything's on the table at this point. We'll have to see what the city council ultimately has to say
Okay.
about whether or not we want to spend this money, depending on what comes of the off-leash conversation.
Because it's kind of a unique site, particularly with trails going by. So it's sort of like you'd hate to go, yeah, let's put the dog park there, and then later on go, we really could have had a XYZ there, and it's already been changed. So just want to make sure that that's on the table when whatever's discussed is discussed.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Okay, the next page is the Ridgeville Commons programming equipment. So in 2027, we've got 200,000 for refrigeration. So when we built Ridgeville Commons, we were planning to have in-ground ice and refrigeration, very, very expensive. And so to make that project work, we pulled that out of the budget. So have 200,000. That's like a mat system. Is that correct, Darren? So we don't have to just rely on Mother Nature, but it will help us create good ice out there.
Correct. We would purchase a liner or a rink system that would go in the center, that concrete plaza area. So we would own whatever the ice shape would be, and then we would rent the refrigeration equipment each year. Just have it set up off to the side to run it to have good ice in that area all winter long.
This is not a hockey rink. This would be a
Pleasure rink.
take pictures with your friends rink type of deal. So, yeah.
And how big is that? I looked at it today. It's not, I think it's bigger than this room, but not a lot bigger.
I will measure it.
Darren's going to measure. He's got that.
100 feet?
Radius. I don't know what the...
And I wondered if there's some history with this. Is there a great clamoring of people saying, I really want to go to Ridgedale and go ice skating?
I don't know that there's a great amount of people. I think we have the one event out there in the winter. We light the trees and we get a good following out there. I think it's our only urban style park, and I think it's one of those things that has worked in other places. I don't know that we've heard hundreds and hundreds of people, but I think it would be a nice site for something this type of amenity.
So this 200,000 would create that amenity?
It would be the purchase of this system.
It would totally create
Yes,
the
then we would
Well-
rent out of our operating budget.
Yeah,
You rent
Gotcha.
And then all the electricity to keep it at ice temperature when it's 45.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the logistics of that and the season and how long you go. Correct. Sometimes in February it is 45 or 50. So, the infrastructure is available out there. We did put all the electrical in, so it's there. But yes, it would cost money to do
Not
that.
free, yeah.
Yeah.
There is, I didn't realize this, but Dick's has a refrigerated rink just across the parking lot from there that's open middle of November to roughly middle of February. And it's open for public skating of parts of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the same price that we charge up at the ice rink behind us, ice arena. So I'm just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, understand.
It's personally not a high priority for me, but maybe I understand the gee whiz appeal.
So the concrete plaza is approximately 95 feet across in a circle, so just under 100-foot diameter.
Okay, we'll keep moving. Next one looks like the Shady Oak Beach. So Shady Oak Beach, run by the rec department. So we look at different things in here. We're looking at, we had the Sauna in the Park program out there. The one thing that we were hoping to upgrade is the lifeguard shack. So where people change when they go for that program is not heated, and so we need to insulate that to have proper air and heating in that area. We would prefer to do that.
So they don't come with their swimming suit on underneath their snowmobile outfit?
Some do. I think some do, right, yeah. It's been such a popular program. Obviously, it wasn't set up for winter use when they built it way back, and so, we're planning to run that program again, and it was very, very popular. We had, over 2,000 reservations, and so we just want to winterize the guard check. That's a big piece of this page, so. We'll just keep going. Timberline Park is the next page. That's $175,000 in 2028. It's the new park. Darren, Matt, any?
That was the land that was donated to the city that previously had a tennis court on it. So when we went through the process and got the neighborhood input, we had approvals to move forward with the park. So we put that in for 2028, and that's so far where it's stayed, and that's where we'll start in 27. We'll start getting neighborhood meetings and do get feedback for what we want for amenities in the park, and then get it designed so we can bid it and build it in 2028.
So with the, thinking back to the page with the parks that have the playground equipment that get refreshed every so often, this is not part of that. I mean, why is it separate?
Because it doesn't
This is a creation of a new park.
Okay.
And then eventually, 20 years down the road, then this park will be in with the other pages when we start
Okay.
replacing it.
That makes sense, thank you.
Why is this one a critical one? It seems like one that we could do whenever, the money makes sense.
Could have been a clerical error.
Yeah, I don't know.
Typically, because we're expanding, that might have been a 3. We'll have to look at that. Thank you. That doesn't seem critical for the safety of the general public, right? Okay, we'll keep moving. The next, probably 5 or so pages are all the trail improvement plan. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to talk about these, but they kind of broke them up by year, and unfortunately, they're not in the right year. We've got 2026 as the Minnetonka Boulevard, 27, 28. Matt, just any kind of general overview about trails and...
It's a big effort. It takes years in advance to start planning these trails. We have a very well-designed trail improvement plan that helps prioritize which trail segments get implemented before others. We also take the opportunity when partnerships or logical connections arise. For instance, when Three Rivers Parks
Moves forward on implementing regional trails through the city, we would potentially move up some smaller connections to connect to those regional trails. We try to treat the trail system holistically, but we don't have infinite funds, so engineering does their best to look ahead and prioritize based on the trail improvement plan, and the CIP reflects that.
2026 is basically the marsh down to Tonka Wood, I
Yep.
believe. Is that correct?
And utilities are currently being buried out there.
So does the city have to pay for that? It seemed like I don't know that I was reading it here, but someplace there was a fairly short trail that was $2 million or something, and that there was a note that said it included burying the utilities, and I was just wanting to make sure I understood why that was our problem.
So the funding for the trails comes from several years ago. There was a franchise fee
Oh, yeah.
from gas and electric. So that's where these coffers come from. When we have to implement the trail and the wires are above, we would partner with Excel, but we end up fronting the cost on that. We consolidate utilities and trenches where necessary. They do the upgrades at that point that are going to be required to eliminate having to tear the trail up in 5 years. So we try to get ahead on some of that.
I think it's a great benefit to have buried utilities. I'm not objecting to that. I had it in my mind that we knew how much it was for a mile of trail, and all of a sudden it was a lot more.
There ends up being a variety of surprise expenses. It's not just the actual trail itself. There's utility work and stormwater issues and all sorts of stuff come up.
There's a separate fund for burying of the overhead. So the cost for burying the overhead utilities is not part of this. There's a different page for that. So, but those fees are collected through franchise fees, and those are franchise fees that existed prior to what was passed to build the trails. So, as far as why the Excel and the power company or the telecommunications companies, they're perfectly happy having their stuff on a pole. So they don't really, there's no benefit to them to bury them. So they're easily accessible to go out and fix something hanging up in the air with their trucks. So there's not really a benefit to them to bury them. So that's why we have to foot the bill.
So why are they burying all that fiber optic in everyone's yard?
Because when the power lines got put in 70, 80 years ago,
There's no poles?
there was no technology to drill those things underground.
So So trail projects, big, obviously these are large, and the price just keeps going up every year. The price per square foot, like you mentioned, it doesn't get cheaper. And so, we're hoping to do one a year, but, because of the cost, and sometimes we're not doing one a year, but a couple big ones coming up.
And the staff time, certainly,
Right.
these end up being a big labor sink.
Right.
So is there a new, just so we can keep a rule of thumb in our mind, roughly cost per mile or half mile or whatever?
It's really tough. For instance, Hopkins Crossroad has a lot of topography, so there's retaining walls
Oh.
that wouldn't be necessary on Minnetonka Boulevard. It's very difficult to have just the
Okay.
overall cost per foot.
We can see if we can try to find something. I know they had a ballpark, and
Okay.
I don't have
mean,
that in
just
front of me. but-
even a range for icky, hilly topography with bridges and scary stuff and then flat.
Yeah, I don't have a number in mind, but
Okay.
yeah, it seems worth having.
Okay, and then the last page is the trail rehab page. So just under $1.5 million over the 5 years. Again, this is for rehabbing trails. Looks like next year we've got some on 62 Vine Hill Road to 60. Is that correct, Darren? Sorry. For trail rehab, we've got some projects next year. So
What page?
21.
So on this one, I guess two questions on the Purgatory Park. The timber bridge with the steel bridge, that's the bridge at the south side of the main center or the one right by the parking lot?
The one by the parking lot.
Okay. And removing the steep slope on the south end of the bridge, that sounds like at the far end of the park.
That's Big Willow.
Oh, okay, good, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good, I like that, because in the winter I fall down there.
Yeah, so 2029 is for trail paving in Purgatory, Covington, and Meadow, where there's existing asphalt trails, and also then in Big Willows, replace that existing.
Yeah, I know, yeah,
timber.
now I missed the big willow, now I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, that's a good safety move.
Yeah, then 2026, so the whole asphalt trail that goes along County Road 62 from basically Baker to Vine Hill Road would be an overlay on that. Pedestrian improvements, ped ramp improvements at the signalized intersections there. And then 2027, Hillway Road, Orchard Road, Arthur Street West. Actually, we just paved that last week because the trail got damaged from a truck that had to drive on it and blew it up. So that one moved up the process pretty fast. Then Dwight Lane, which is a short connection from Dwight Lane, goes up to YMCA Lane. There's a trail there. Linwood Road is right on the north side of Highway 7 by the southern Target entrance, or by the bank, and so there's a trail on the north side that goes towards Old Excelsior.
Oh, yeah, I've
one
been
of
on
those
that.
where
That needs,
Yeah.
sorry.
And then the short segment on Town Line Road. So,
And then that last page just was a map that showed the trail projects in the next 4 years. So just kind of a visual of where we're at throughout the city.
I try to remember, and maybe it's on there in red, I guess. The McGinty Road deal, just to try to get a trail going from, say, right out here out towards McGinty Road to Wyzetta. Is that in some? I know the mayor always talks about that.
Three Rivers.
So Three Rivers is currently studying a connection between, they don't have a route planned, but Wyzetta down to their regional trail connection by
Okay.
our civic center. So the route would have to come through that location, so we're sort of
Hoping it
waiting and
happens.
hoping that Three Rivers would implement the
Great.
trail through there.
That would be great. Thanks.
So again, those are the park and trail pages. I don't know if you have any other general comments or questions, or did we miss anything? Is there something in there that we should pull out, or? funding priorities, anything moved up or back, or again, we're looking for feedback and
Sure.
whether we pass it along as is or with some suggested modifications. I think we're just looking for feedback tonight. So
Yeah, I've got some feedback. So what I'm thinking here is kind of stemming from the work that's already in place through Jace Alexander as the director of DEI for the city, and also from my own personal standpoint as kind of a voice for people with disabilities and concerns about equity and inclusion in our planning and our expenditures, which is what we're talking about here. And so I have some thoughts and questions about how we got to where we are as it relates to some of those matters. So the first thing I would say is when I look at priorities, the CIP priority rankings, number 1 through 3, which is on page 35 of our meeting packet, and you pointed them out. I'm curious if we would consider ADA-related concerns or accessibility, inclusion-related concerns for people with altered ability. Number 1, a project necessary for public health and safety or to meet legal mandates as a priority level. So I would be interested in your comment on that, but I'd also like to hear from potentially the city attorney as well as Jace Alexander on where they would prioritize these matters, because my concern when looking at how we've prioritized these different expenditures, questions of accessibility and inclusion should then rise, in my opinion, to the level of the ADA and legal mandates. Now, however that interpretation falls between, I would say, 1 and 2 on the considerations, it still may be something that, as a park board or as a city, in conjunction and in input from perhaps the DEI Commission and or Jace Alexander directly, we may say we want to elevate equity-focused, inclusivity-focused expenditures. Now that presupposes that effectively none of this none of this type of discussion or planning was included in the Parks Open Space and Trails Plan or the Trail Improvement Plan or the Park Investment Plan, the Park Investment Plan. And I quite honestly didn't see any verbiage in any of those documents that indicated inclusion, accessibility, or equity as points of focus. And so it makes me concerned, especially given that our DEI staff as well as the DEI Commission was not yet formed when these plans were put into place. And so some of these toolkits, like I know as staff you have an equity toolkit that you're supposed to be using, that was not in place either for you to kind of reset and say to yourself, how is this meeting our inclusivity goals, or do we even have those goals when these decisions were being made in the last several years? So I would like us to basically reassess the Trail Improvement and the Park Investment Plan for an inclusion-focused project funding system, as opposed to the way it's being proposed now. And as a city, we would not be out of line to do that. In fact, it's probable that we would be either on time relative to most municipalities, with the exception of certain ones in our own metro area like Minneapolis, who started doing some of this work a decade ago to assess their the degree to which their Parks and Rec system was inclusive and accessible, and to the point where they have, even in this 25, 26 years, a recreation Parks and Rec Minneapolis ADA update. So they're kind of making that a staff priority to glean through everything that's being done with the lens of the ADA. And then they also have a Parks for All comprehensive plan that's over a 15-year time period that was implemented in 2021 through 2036. So I believe that Minnetonka should have the same focus as we're deciding about tens of millions of dollars being spent over 5 years, that before we start spending it, we should be reassessing whether it's really focused on accessibility and inclusivity, because that's what this is all about, is making sure as many people as possible that want to come to our parks or be involved in our recreation activities can do it, and that everybody is included and it's accessible to them. Again, the National Recreation and Park Association organization, which you guys are probably aware of or members in, they have great resources right on. They have a Park for Inclusion resources webpage. So a lot of this work in terms of how this should be done does not require brand new thinking, because it's part of your national organization that is elevating this. We also have, apart from Minneapolis, another local leader, and apart from Jace Alexander as our kind of citywide equity and inclusion leader, but we have the Public Health Law Center in St. Paul has a publication that they printed in October, or published in 2024, October, entitled Elevating Equitable Access to Parks. And again, it's another kind of highlight roadmap mechanism for cities to think about development, redevelopment, upkeep, and the like regarding equity and inclusion and accessibility. And so I'm not sure what the best kind of way to direct, but I would like to make this actionable instead of just a discussion or me saying something. So there's a couple ways that I guess I seek your opinion on how to do this, but we haven't had in place, as far as I can tell, kind of equity toolkit mechanisms for the decision making that this board does or has in the past. And I'm not sure that many commissions or boards do. And so we've got plans that are rolling that haven't had this review or lens. And rather than just continuing on and letting 5 years of work and money be spent without this lens, I feel like we should have a hard stop and a review and utilize either the city staff equity toolkit and or within each board, in our case the park board, utilize regional best practice, regional roadmaps like Minneapolis has already put together, or utilize the national organizations that you guys are members of probably and aware of, like the National Recreation and Park Association, to do a comb through and a reassessment of how does our plannings and our spending priorities really reflect park equity, accessibility, and inclusivity. Because my concern is that we will continue to fall behind in meeting those goals for members of our community, and this will, we'll just continue to fall further behind in prioritizing funding for those groups. So I'm curious what my colleagues think, but also from staff, other than kind of a directive, for me to formally request that, which I'm happy to do, what you would recommend as a mechanism to get this going.
Well, I'll make a comment, I guess. Maybe staff has better way to think about it. I think you raised some very good points. Our role is kind of to be a sounding board or for the city council and stuff. We have not had any direction from the DEI unit or from the city attorney regarding these very valid issues. And I think it was presumptuous for us to impose a lens on that in the context of the timeline for the CIP. But I think it's a really good point to have as a, I don't know if it's a motion or a note or whatever, but I think you raised really good points that it would be, what's the city council's position on this? Because they are excellent points, but we've had no direction or guidance provided in terms of what the council's perspective on that is, other than obviously the formation of DEI and that. The city attorney is new, so it's going to be new for that. But I think that's a really good point, and I think that would be definitely worth, at least from my perspective, worth incorporating, either whether that's a motion or just a statement, if the others are on board with that, to kind of query the council what they want us to do, how we would approach that.
So if I may, Chair Ingraham and Park Board members, just to help me understand kind of what you're saying. So are you looking at the CIP here as it's being presented, which is a 5-year program that we see every year? It's kind of a rolling 5-year program, and we have elements in the program like trail master planning and park master planning and habitat restoration. Are you suggesting that each of those items, or the pages, we call them pages, or projects, are looked at through a DEI lens? You also mentioned the post plan, the trail improvement plan. Those are whole separate planning efforts that have taken place that sort of guide what goes into the CIP. They have their own goals. I haven't studied the post plan recently, but I'm pretty sure I recall there was an accessibility and inclusivity part of the plan that is intended to be applied whenever we use it. So when we do a park master plan, we're trying to achieve the goals of the post plan as a whole. I'm just trying to understand what exactly you're looking for, and so just to kind of maybe throw it back to you.
Sure. So, thank you. And this is just iterative. We're trying to kind of narrow and hone, and how do we make this work? So when I look at page 37 of our packet and 36, we've got these brief summary statements about what the post plan is, what the trail improvement plan is, and what the park investment plan is. And then, of course, as we just moved through the CIP, we looked at specific funding, both as a page, a single page for a single project or over 5 years, but also trail improvement plan, park improvement plan. And so anyway, when we look at these summaries of what these plans are, which of course the plans are 50,
Big.
20, 30, 70, whatever pages. Anyway, the summaries at least do not indicate anything about equity, inclusion, or accessibility, which is a major problem, in my opinion. And it's not just, words matter, summary matters. It shows you what your values are, right? So the fact that we don't see in the post plan that there's a focus on accessibility and inclusivity, and we don't see in a summary of a TIP or PIP the same language, tells me that we haven't really thought of that. That hasn't really been on the radar. And that's a major problem, in my opinion. And whether I'm directed by the city council, to me it's about justice. So I'm not going to wait to be told what I think justice should look like in our city. So I'm just going to speak that. So I do think we should strongly act or recommend that before we continue to allocate money for projects that were decided upon and or strongly proposed based on good intentions and good planning, but without a clear focus on equity, accessibility, inclusivity, we need to stop and reassess. And then once that's part of our playbook, as a park board and lots of other boards and commissions, through the help of the DEI Commission and input, through the help of Jace Alexander, then it's embedded. And this doesn't become what will be, for us or for the city council, big lifts and staff to reassess all this stuff that has been on the burner and churning through for the last several years, but without this important justice-based lens that I think has been missing. So I do think it's both, Leslie. It's both page by page for the projects in which there's specific monies and allocations to say, is this really, would we really spend this money in this way or on this project from the lens I'm describing? Yay or nay? And it may result in things being completely eliminated. Or it may result in saying, we don't have hardly any money for this, that, or the other that is a primary accessibility and inclusivity focus. So therefore, monies already earmarked for these other projects are gone. Those projects are gone because our focus should be in a different direction. So it's both page by page, and it's also these larger plans being reassessed. Now, I've already had communications with Jace Alexander. He and I have discussed varieties of issues unrelated to the park board through other volunteer groups I'm a part of, and he is not. He can't be everywhere all at once for the entire city. So we have to be taught or learn how to do some of this equity analysis for the sake of the community, for the sake of our positions here on this park board, and for the sake of providing good input and feedback to the city council to make sure that the decisions we're passing along or recommending or providing affirmations on have been vetted in this way, with this lens in mind. Just as we use other metrics, usage, stewardship of money, as you were kind of saying, I want to understand better, trail price per foot or per mile. We care about these things, and I care about this, and I hope my fellow park members do too. So it's a both and in my opinion, Leslie.
Some of it could be fairly easily addressed with just adding comments as far as ADA wise. So every trail in the trail improvement plan, when it gets rebuilt, addresses all the ADAs, right? So we design it new ped ramps depending on what's needed at traffic signals. So all the trails are looked at ADA wise to make sure they're current, and then that's both new construction in the trail improvement plan, and then what also we do in the trail rehabilitation. So if we overlay a trail, every pedestrian ramp crossing over Romita Street, we get current ADA standards. So a lot of that is addressed. So, when we get new playground equipment, we meet with the vendors and look at what are some accessible elements in the playground or playground amenities or features in a playground equipment, for accessible things that are available for, when doing the picking out the playground equipment. So it may not be specifically addressed, that we could address fairly easily parts of what you're saying that we're already doing.
So like the skate park would be developed with ADA in mind,
Correct.
if it's done, if we do.
So for instance, referring to the post plan, the guiding principle of equity inclusion has 4 specific goals. Equity inclusion, parks and recreation facilities, help build diverse and equitable inclusion, inclusive to our community, develop park programming and facilities that fit the need of community through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, encourage recreation participation by all park users, regardless of race, age, gender, ability. These are things that we put up front in our, or could certainly do better in terms of our master planning outreach, and making it very clear that when we refer to the post plan, that we call out these distinct goals. This is page 19 of the post plan, and really highlight those as soliciting that particular feedback from the community. We do want to expand our parks to as many people as possible. So for instance, the problem with the post plan is there's a lot in here. And some of it certainly does get lost. But one of the key guiding principles is promote equity and inclusion, prioritize equity throughout the park's open space and trail system. And so we could certainly do a better job of quantifying what that looks like as the projects roll out.
Yeah, I think, I think anytime we're in the position of making a decision to move something forward, I would like staff to have an equity note for the recommendation. And I would like that note to reflect that staff has engaged within the community to get feedback that this actually represents something that people who are concerned about or themselves deal with accessibility or inclusivity difficulties think actually accomplishes what they hope, as opposed to assumptions being made, or I read this in a book or a pamphlet about how to do accessibility builds in a playground or this, right? So we need to know from members of the disability community that this is what actually is impactful. And then the second is kind of progress reports, right? How are we doing? How is this? What have we accomplished? What do we continue to accomplish? So it's very explicit for us, for the community, because right now, page by page, there's nothing explicit about this, and so it leaves me with the question, and again, I don't think I'm off completely, that this maybe wasn't the first lens that people were using. I have seen. I have young children, so I'm at playgrounds all the time. I have seen playgrounds revamped in this city that are demonstrably inaccessible in their revamped state. And I think to myself, okay, well, that was a missed opportunity. And so I don't want anybody else to have that sense as they encounter our parks or try to access or engage in our parks. I guess, yeah, one thing would be kind of an equity impact statement would be, or I don't know what to term it, something along those lines for every project that we need to make a decision on would be helpful. And I don't, I guess I'm still waiting to get some more information on the process within the city already for equity assessments, because I know there is one. But I think it would be helpful for us as a commission as well. This is kind of secondary to this immediate business, but in general, for Jace Alexander to be able to come talk to us about these processes integrating into our future decision making for whatever we're dealing with. Today we're dealing with CIP and natural resources planning, but to be able to use these same tools to help us as we go forward with whatever's on our agenda. But it would be helpful for me, I think it would be helpful for the City Council to see more explicitly how equity considerations have been addressed.
I'd almost tack onto that a little bit, just saying that, you can meet all the minimum ADA guidelines, but that's the minimum, right? But then looking at it through an equity lens of what can we do to go above and beyond to really make sure we're being accessible and equitable. So I think I understand what you're saying is that we can add this verbiage into the documents, but that's really just skimming the surface of what we could be doing. We could be looking at it through a completely different lens and really making it more of a priority, as opposed to this is our minimum checklist of we've hit these minimum things that we have to do. What else can we do to make it even better? So you mentioning the playgrounds and how, yes, they probably are built to ADA standards, right? But there are additional things that could be added to a playground to make it even that much more accessible and inclusive for people of different abilities. So I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is like really going back and looking at the documents through a different lens completely and saying, have we tried to do everything we can to make these parks, trails, playgrounds, whatever, as accessible and inclusive as possible, if I'm understanding you right.
I think you said it perfect. Yep.
So, from an actionability perspective, here, our action we would take tonight, that we're supposed to take tonight, is whether or not we recommend these going forward to the City Council in their current form, or not recommend that going forward.
Or
and-
with changes.
I'm sorry?
Or with changes.
Or with changes. Yeah, that's true.
Chair, I might add, I think it's important, you made some very good points, and in my opinion, Jace is our expert, and I would like to personally, use him as we work through this process, number one, and then two, I think it's a good idea to have him come and talk about
It
the
would be
future.
good.
So,
Yeah.
not necessarily holding up projects, but as we work through this 2026 CIP with him and the DEI division, we've got a second person now too, they just haven't gotten to a lot of things, right? I mean, it's a newer division, and so I think that would be a good idea for us as staff to go back to him. We work with a lot of people across different departments and divisions. As you know, a lot of eyes are on the CIP and making sure that he and Corinne, our new DEI staff member, see that too. I think that would be maybe an option moving forward.
If I could just add, it helps me to sort of synthesize things that I'm hearing from the board and want to make sure that everyone on the board has a chance to respond, but I'm hearing some different layers to this. So there's the CIP here in particular that you're seeing, which is, these are pages in a much larger three-ring binder full of pages that the council sees. We do right now have a process where we denote those that are more on the lines of sustainability, stewardship. We have some icons on some of these pages, or at least we used to. I'm not sure if they're still there or not. But if the park board wants to provide that feedback to the council, that perhaps there should be that the park board wants to see that diversity, equity, inclusivity lens to the CIP as a whole, and especially to the pages that you see. I think that's certainly something that you guys could recommend. And then I see, or I hear, or you're talking about the specific planning efforts that we've undertaken. As we continue to work through those lead to new projects. Making sure that we have and we're using some kind of lens and a way to assess them. I do think having Jace actually come and speak, and actually you read my mind, because I was planning on having Jace come and speak to the park board, as well as Allie Sutherland, our sustainability coordinator. Those, I think, are two lenses that would be really beneficial as you look at some of the work you do related to parks and park access and things like that. So there's that. And then you will, every year the park board will see and we have a chance to review your strategic plan. And so that's something, certainly with the new park board members, that's something that will be brought to you. I think, Kelly, do we do that in December or January? I can't, somewhere around that time frame. That could be a time to include some of those ideas and desires in the strategic plan of the board as well. So I think there's different layers of this that you can start to incorporate and work this into if the board wants to do that. So I think those are good ideas, but we certainly want to have a chance for the other park board members to reflect on that.
Reflecting back on the last few years that I've been on the board, I agree that equity and inclusion have not been enough of a priority in our discussions, and do regret that. We do have an opportunity as the Parks Group to kind of be a leader in it if we so choose to be. I do want to do it in a way that's synergist with the strategy of the city, though, just in their goals and their strategy, just so we're not doing things that they would not approve, for example. So I love the idea of meeting with Jace. Maybe he can help us with what the strategy for the city and goals for the city are starting to look like, so that as we're talking and making decisions, we can ensure that we're marching to a similar beat. If you do already have, I don't think, my recommendation would be not to hold any of this up, not to stop it right now. But if you do have equity inclusion comments that are relevant on the pages, it would be kind of cool if we were the group that really made a mark and made a point of it. And then recognize that we have some work to do over the course of the next year. We're not committing to all 5 years right now. We're kind of committing to 12 months, really. So recognize as a group that we have some work to do to up our game in this area.
Caleb, I appreciate and respect greatly your commentary and align to it very much in terms of heightening awareness of what you're describing for equity and inclusion. And I also respect that what the staff has done is that they have used that lens. It's not that it's been absent or AWOL. It just may not have shown up in the manner that maybe we would have liked to have seen it. So having it more front and center, I think, is a good idea and a noble idea, and the concept of justice is correct there. And so, I can definitely align to those comments.
I could imagine taking I'm sorry, I'm not on. I could imagine taking the page that's park investment plan, talking about updating all the playground equipment. I don't know what page that is. It says it's one of one. Huh?
On the bottom,
It says one of one on mine.
I don't know what page.
Anyway, it's the park investment plan. It's the one about updating the playground equipment. Since you particularly brought that up, I could certainly support adding some language to this to direct staff to work with some kind of, with a group. I don't know how to find a group that would want to work with the city, but maybe you do, to say these are, given these 4 choices for playground equipment, this is better, that's terrible, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I don't bring these issues up as some sort of expert on exactly what this should look like down or with really any detail. It's just as we rely on staff as park board members, just as staff relies on consulting agencies or companies. We would still work within that framework, but we would have not just as a lens, as you said, and I totally 100% agree with exactly what you said, but as an elevated focus. And that's what's missing from just saying, we approve this, but gee whiz, City Council, we'd like you to have a stronger equity assessment for these projects. Because what I'm talking about is not checking the boxes. It's about a fundamental, I think it's more fundamental, the shift that I'm describing for how we should be addressing the money we spend on parks, the money we spend on rec in this city. And this, as you said, Leslie, and I appreciate that perspective, is a tiny part of the CIP book, right? But when I think of accessibility and inclusion within a city, one of the most blatant places that shows up or doesn't show up as a fundamental, foundational priority is in parks and rec activities. Because most of the limitations that people think about, that they have ableism embedded into city functioning, is related to physical or cognitive disabilities. And Parks and Rec is a big flag in those, in that sphere, okay, as opposed to, I don't know, economic development or, I mean, there are other areas, there are lots of areas where these issues matter, but park and rec activities and trails and playgrounds are a very visible part in which community members or visitors to our community will or will not interact based on how well the city has fundamentally prioritized equity and inclusive accessibility themes and frameworks into the foundation of what they come up with. And because my concern is that it's not been the case, not out of malfeasance, but just not out of it being a foundational component to the thinking and planning, that by moving forward, much more than perhaps the end of this fiscal year, with the status quo, means we're missing an opportunity, a major opportunity to be leaders for our community members and for the perhaps the metro in this realm. So the first thing I would say is maybe could we formalize could I direct staff to meet with Jace, or find a time that Jason Alexander could meet with us in the next 1 or 2 meetings, so we can start getting we can start being an extension of his expertise as we make these decisions sooner rather than later. And then craft, with the help of park board members or staff, some sort of recommendation to the city council that's effectively saying we have significant concerns that the CIP as it relates to park matters should be reassessed with a foundation and focus on accessibility and inclusion, and then brought back to the park board for review.
When is this being submitted to the city council?
The next study session is June 15th.
So soon, very soon.
So typically the CIP does not come back to the park board. That's just the process and how it's been. Like, again, the city council sees it in June. I believe it's a September date, and then approval in December. So that's the current process.
So then it really would be, our recommendation would be, when it goes to the city council, that there is some sort of stipulation within it that they need to pay attention, or they need to elevate the thought of DEI concerns within this plan. So when they look at it, they need to look at it through the lens of DEI. Or at least, I mean, it needs to be a consideration that they think about it, because it wasn't explicitly put into the plan. So
Right.
we would need to ask them to think about it.
And it would pertain to any of the projects, not
Well,
just
yeah.
the park board. Basically pertains to any city project. I think it's a good point, and I do think meeting with, having Jace meet with us, and maybe we had to the attorney too, I don't know, but Jace meeting, because we had no input from that. I'm more interested in Jace meeting with staff to come up with how staff incorporates these goals in our planning, because by the time stuff comes to us, it's too late.
Yeah, yeah.
We're just here to kind of review work.
And to be fair, this is a lot of money
Yeah.
that's already been allocated, and if we truly care about this, we want to make sure that it's being paid attention to, so that this money isn't used improperly or not in the best way possible.
So I think just to move things along, I think one thing would be to recommend that this moves forward in its current form, but with a flag raised about the concern whether or not the DEI goals are reflected as strongly as they should be, because I think you bring a good point, which is they probably aren't. But in the absence of knowing what the city's direction is for that, in terms of we're following along with the priorities that we're getting through staff, and so I'm guessing right now there's a bigger issue just in general. And maybe one way to flag it is, as this goes forward, we just make the notation that we would like to see more thoughtful emphasis placed on those goals, and also potentially, adjusting the priorities or adding a priority to the CIP process around those goals. But I think I think we have to keep moving forward with the investments here, just because of the timeliness of contracts and a lot of these things. Well, a good number of these really aren't what I would, think of as DEI related, like restoration plans and Emerald Ash Borer and things like that. Cullen could be because of the kinds of trails that go in. Certainly, whoever made the point about the park equipment certainly could. But I do think, to Caleb's point, we've got some terminology in the post plan, but we haven't really executed through in terms of verbalizing more explicitly how it's impacting things. And I would agree with Corey's comment about, there's this threshold for ADA, and then there's, because I've seen comments about people who, and I apologize, I'm not that knowledgeable about this stuff, but who'll come back with saying, what's the right terminology for kids with sensory issues about how, the park equipment and stuff like that. They may be able to access it, but there's still sensory overload issues and stuff that can be addressed. So I don't know what all that means.
Would the staff need a motion or a decision from us as an outcome of this section?
We have to make a recommendation to move these forward or not.
Yeah, ideally, the board is making a recommendation regarding the CIP portion that you're seeing that's going to the council,
In the form of a motion and a vote?
ideally.
So,
Yes.
I'm just curious
Yeah,
how you.
yeah.
And I think rather than trying to work through each of these and add a dimension of how much, I think just a blanket statement about the relative importance that's placed on the accessibility and equity and inclusion elements would be appropriate, because I think it probably flows through other departments' plans as well.
well, it certainly, this should be citywide. It should touch all manner of things, but my point again is, today here we are as park board members, and we know that the park system, the park portion of our city is a major place in which accessibility and inclusivity can be leveraged for the greater good of the community. So I would modify slightly what you're saying about foundation and say all CIP projects should be reassessed by the City Council with an equity foundation, and any CIP project for which multi-year funding is allocated should be considered for like a temporary hold for a more in-depth accessibility inclusivity review. Now, we could look at that, or we could direct staff to look at that. So I'm not talking about something that says this year we're doing this trail, the next year we're doing this trail. I'm talking about, and maybe there isn't one, I'd have to delve back into each of these pages. Certain projects, if we start now, we're going for 5 years, because it takes $200,000 every year to finish this project. But we don't want to spend that $1 million if it really doesn't reflect at its foundation accessibility and inclusivity. So we don't want to start that train rolling on that kind of project. That's different than the ones that, yes, there's funding every year, but it's for a new segment, let's say, separate segment. And we have several of those pages. That's a different thing to me, because we can then reassess that every year through our equity lens. Staff can do it, we can do it. But a project that hasn't started, could start, requires funding every year to keep it going, that we're not sure has been adequately vetted through a lens of accessibility. To me, we should recommend those be halted by the City Council. So that would be my caveat in a general statement about equity. The equity should be the foundation and reassessed on all of these, and any CIP that requires funding year after year to see to fruition a final project that should be put on hold until a more formal full equity review can be done.
Or, another perspective, is there a way for staff to go through these pages again quickly and just update either the description or the justification and add, where applicable, a DEI component, like within a description for parks or playgrounds? It would just have something that says, we're going to look at this through a DEI lens, or we're going to You know, like just something quick that you can add into these pages. If this is going to city council quickly soon, there might not be time to do a whole overhaul, but maybe there's a way to just take these individual project pages and just quickly update them.
Well, there's
Yeah.
another way to look at this is that there are only 20-ish here. Can we look at the first 5 and talk through so that everybody's clear on what sorts of things you think are okay to move forward and are not? Because I'm not completely clear on what you mean. I mean,
Well,
I
so-
get the idea about if it's a long project, but
Well, let me,
there's nuances.
My point is, though, that by doing the work that's in front of us, it's already putting things that were in motion and thought of as important prior to an equity focus on the books for money being spent, as opposed to, look, team, city, staff, if equity was at the foundation of what you were thinking we should spend money on in this city, would it really look like these projects? And maybe the answer is absolutely. But I actually would hope that that's not the case, because I do think we can do better, and I hope we will do better in the future. So I would think that if we really said foundationally, this is our focus going forward, that what we have in front of us would actually change to reflect that.
well, let me just, maybe I'm going to try to be too practical. I agree with your sentiments totally. A major example, a major thrust of the city has been connectivity and access, the ability for people to not have to drive their cars, to be able to take trails and that. A significant number of these pages and dollars relate to trails expansion. And I can't imagine we want to put those on hold to reassess whether or not we want to do those trails, how they're executed perhaps. Are we at the minimum of ADA, or are they going to cost a little more than they say here because we want to go a little bit above what those trails would look like? But I gotta believe that the city council would want to continue to pursue the trail expansion plan. The efforts around natural resources, Emerald Ash Borer, all those plans, that's our natural resource we're protecting. And I don't think those would be significantly changed. Would we say we're going to forego any natural resource restoration dollars for the next 3 years while we develop a DEI plan for the city to then create new plans based on that? I don't know. I think that's an expensive proposition for our natural resources. Skate park, maybe that's one that we shouldn't be saying is one that gets teed up, because one, it's not happening yet. Two, Glen Lake Park, I'm sorry, Glen Lake Park. And that clearly, a greater focus on your issues could result in a different kind of design for that. I think it's certainly the playground equipment, improvements or changes could do that too. But when you say you want to hold for a reassessment of all the plans with a DEI lens, it frankly bothers me because, one, we've been given no DEI lens from the city to apply. And I would think
Would the staff?
Huh?
Would the staff agree with that?
I mean,
Well, certainly the park board hasn't.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'm asking staff if they
we
feel like
have
they
an
have the tools.
equity assessment tool that we use internally for internal programs, but not something that we've brought forth to commissions or boards as of yet.
So would you say right now you're developing your plans based on the city's guidance for DEI?
Yeah, I would say overall, sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we use the tool.
So we needed just to maybe better awareness of that. Just as an informational point.
Right. And if to having Jace come and talk to the park board, and I think we can try to see if he's available in August, which is your next regular meeting, or next meeting, that might be a good time to talk about what types of tools could be used at a commission level as far as assessing projects. We do have, again, the Park Board has a strategic plan. You will review that next year for the year after that. That certainly is a time to also incorporate some equity language if you so choose, but also having some mechanism or assessment tool to use to review projects, whether it's at a staff level or even at a Park Board level. That's something we could also look into and seek advice from Jace as well on that.
Dave, I tend to agree with you. I'm more practical also. I think there's a balancing act we have to do here between what is aspirational and what's practical. And I think that, as I said to Caleb, I completely align to his sentiments, and I really respect the advocacy to heighten awareness here. But I also don't think we should throw sand in the gears of what has been done, which still has an overlay of some DEI. It just hasn't shown up in these reports, to Caleb's point. But I do think that we should say this is a multifactorial analysis that we're going to be doing in the future, and as one of the factors in that multifactorial analysis is that DEI is going to have heavier weighting than we've had in the past.
So, do we need a motion to move? What do we need, given this isn't a typical kind of thing? This is a motion to move these forward to the board, to the city council with the directive around, I don't know if we're querying them on how effectively they're incorporating DEI into these, or requesting that they more actively involve DEI objectives in our planning process, because maybe it's happening at your level, we just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so I guess, so what's before you now are these pages of the CIP. So if you choose to recommend approval and moving these forward to the council, to the city council for review with no changes to, dollar amounts and this project over that project, but you want the council to review with a DEI lens when they go and review the exact same thing you're reviewing. That's certainly something you can put into a motion. Certainly, having Jace come and talk to the Park Board, that doesn't have to be a motion.
No.
I hear you guys on that. And then also using it more as a lens going forward. I don't think we need a specific motion on that. I'm hearing there's some consensus on staff direction, so I don't feel like we need a motion on that. But ideally, we do have a motion specific to these CIP pages that are in front of you.
So before we do that, did anybody have any, because I have one more question, but does anyone else have other more questions about these before we entertain a motion?
So, you have a question or?
A question.
Okay.
A totally different topic. In fact, it feels very secondary at this point after what you brought up, which is very important.
So I have
Okay.
something that
Yes.
is kind of on the same wavelength. I would propose that we remove the skating rink up at Ridgedale Commons.
Okay.
So
No, I
can I, and I hear exactly what you're saying. I'm just wondering if we should close off the equity discussion and make our motion and recommendation on that.
I think there can be an equity issue related to that.
To the ice rink. Okay.
Well, let me ask my question, because it doesn't relate. And it does seem very secondary now. This is more to Matt. So the city council is going to be reviewing and making some decisions on purgatory relative to the off-leash areas, and that will involve funds. We shouldn't be worried at all about the CIP aspect relative to any funds that would be involved in the off-leash area there.
None of those
Or in other
potential
parks.
dollars.
Okay, so
included in
that's,
this CIP.
that's a separate,
Yes.
separate bucket they're going to have to solve for.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's not our responsibility to, yeah.
Not yet,
Have a sheet
anyway.
on that. But it could be added before December.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, they could choose to do
Okay.
that.
But it wouldn't involve, say, okay, we got to drop this to do that? Or it could, okay. Just so you know. Like,
It's a
it could
hot
involve,
priority. It
could
could
involve
be
dropping the
prioritized.
ice rink
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think if we're talking
so-
about able-bodied people or ableness, that's sort of an assumption about,
So that assumes they can't skate.
the rules say you can't be on the ice without skates.
But it doesn't mean you have to be standing on skates to skate.
Okay.
I mean,
luckily
you see
that
it all
was
the
a
time.
2027. I think we have some time to take a step back and like really think about the proposal because it's 2 years out. I feel like what we're really committing to is the 2026.
Correct. The
approval, right?
2026 is the
I think that
actual
project
budget.
needs a little more, like, what are we really thinking here and why are we doing it? But maybe not take it off right now because I don't think that money's getting,
Yeah, although,
That's
and I
committed too.
think what I was gonna, again, I'm trying to be I'm trying to be a little bit more specific than just, make equity the foundation of this decision, City Council.
I think that's-
I would like to
it'd be
call out a
clearer.
few projects that I think. I would like to be more explicit to the City Council about projects that we can see that maybe the city would rework if they had started from the foundation of equity. One of them is the skate park, which is not called the skate park, it's called Glen Lake Park. But everybody knows what's been there, okay? So from an equity lens, you would have to say to yourself, is that what we envision maintaining in this space? From an equity lens, you'd have to say to yourself, does the ice rink represent what we, is that reflective of this foundational value that we want to move forward with as we make these decisions? Those are two things we could call out in our recommendation to the City Council. So there may be a pragmatic, we approve or we recommend in general the CIP. We request that the City Council elevate an equity review as they decide whether to make final approval. But we specifically request these two projects be reconsidered, or whatever term we want to use, from an inclusivity and accessibility standpoint.
Kim, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel like I have the information to fully understand why you would make that determination. I haven't heard from this consultant that you're talking about. As I said, this is a multifactorial, but not the primary factorial. So you're making it primary, and I'm not sure that that's correct here. I have a son who was a phenomenal skateboarder, and he had friends in wheelchairs at the skate park. So I'm not in alignment with making those recommendations to the City Council.
Well, my suggestion is not that there is no longer a skate park. It's that I know, or I'm fairly confident, that equity was not at the foundation of the decision or the current ideas in people's brain about what basically a potential brand new space we've got to tear down. We've got a very old skate park. If you started from scratch and you had an equity focus, what would staff and the park board say we want there?
You mean how we'd use the space in total?
Yeah. Again, if it was a clean slate, if it literally was a clean slate, not just an old skate park next to a raised building. So that's why I bring that up. Not that it would never include a skate park, but my strong sense is, up to this point, these have not been the foundational considerations.
But there's going to be a new plan now that there's been a decision to get rid of the building. And I remember when we were talking about the skate park a couple years ago, that there was talk about kids in wheelchairs.
Right.
So it's,
The skate park is an interesting one because from my perspective, and I appreciate Brad's comment too, we've had the community come forward with an expressed concern around that opportunity. And we've had Minnetonka East middle schools come forward. The teacher has got one of the largest programs in the metro area with kids. So the community's expressed a lot of interest in this, and the city council has to date been supportive of that. So to say to those interested parts for the last 3 years that have been exploring this, to say, well, time out, we're going to stop and reconsider how we might use that whole corner, when we know there's a strong desire by people for that amenity. I don't like that word, but we seem to use it. Seems a little premature when, to your point, we should be developing it in a way so that it's accessible for all. But I wouldn't say at this point we should stop it. I mean, it could end up being stopped based on the design of the plan or the budget, but to not continue to do the development of the proposal seems premature to me.
Yeah, and I mean, the skate park was one of the first projects when I came on the board. And so we've seen a lot of iterations of this. We've seen a lot of different designs. We went through a lot of feasibility studies. I didn't see anything in any of that work that didn't seem like it was not going to take into consideration accessibility. I feel confident that the skate park is going to consider all of those things. And I think, especially with the new design and the new reimagining of this park, I think it's actually going to be even better than what we were expecting.
To keep this moving, I would make the recommendation, Dave, that we move forward with the CIPs as recommended by staff, with a very heavy, serious notation around the sentiments that we've talked about regarding DEI sensibilities and advocacy that we feel is really important for the park board and for our community. But I don't think we should be holding this up.
Is that a motion?
If you want it to be,
Okay, we need a motion, right, Leslie?
Yeah.
then that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
and now there's discussion,
Make a tweet.
presumably.
Oh, okay, discussion.
I mean,
Yeah, that's true, thank you.
Caleb should get to have, speak again.
Yeah, so I think overall, we're talking about the same thing. I have a sense of urgency about this because I feel like we're behind. This hasn't been a focus, and so that's where I'm coming from with not, putting sand in the gears, as the term was laid out. And we should reassess in a mighty way when the need arises, and we should gum up the system when the need arises in as quickly as possible. So I don't have. I'm not speaking practically. I recognize that for the governance of a city. I'm speaking with haste, and I hope that we can. I hope the city acts in haste as it relates to equity reassessment. I don't know how to express that in verbiage to the city, because I feel like what some communities do in regards to these issues is they perform lip service, or they put it in the plan and they never actually address it explicitly. And that would be a massive fail for me morally, and for our board, I feel, and for the city. And so I would just like to spend another minute or two. We have an attorney, so he's a great verbiage guy, but can we come up with some a bit of a strong, just a small statement that's the park board approves the CIP, but strongly wishes for a significant equity and accessibility emphasis or foundation to be placed on the final approval of these projects by the city council.
And why do you not want to make an amendment to the playground page? I mean, I heard you say I'm not an expert, and maybe that was your reason, but that seems like the most, it's the example that you gave was that some of the new playground equipment has not been very accessible, and this seems like an opportune time because we know there's dollars being spent each year in different parks. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't understand why you don't want to change. Change that.
Yeah. So I think I'm trying to walk a line between like the approach to the approach to these different projects that we encounter or that staff work on annually, and integrating, weaving into that as a foundation that equity is the first thing people are thinking about. Because when you have that, then you create parks differently. You create playground systems differently. They cost differently. And so we have to factor that in. But as a new member, I don't know, do we really every year go through this in July?
Yep.
We're in
Yes.
June.
The whole season.
But again, we do this in what appears to be somewhat superficial. Like, I'm not hearing the details of the playgrounds tonight or in this
That
document.
comes like in the project management timeline.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, we're a kind of a advisory governance role. We're not in the supervising and managerial role for this.
Right.
So I would not expect for us to be reviewing and approving.
So if
equipment.
we say, I mean, apart from saying we don't want to just meet expectations on the ADA for our trails, for our parks, for our playgrounds, for our refurbishment and the like. We want to exceed it, or we want to lead. That's certainly my vision or my hope for this city, but I don't, other than making that recommendation, I can't be detailed about every single part of those processes. I would rely, as I said at the beginning, on DEI and equity experts or national organizations that inform our park and rec staff, and I would rely on the consulting firms that we choose to utilize that maybe they have the track record in equity-driven park development or refurbishment or the like that I don't have. That's why I say I don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be an expert. Our staff doesn't have to be an expert, but we learn together and then we use experts that are as consultants. So that's why I guess I don't know what to say to be explicit, other than to try to be explicit in the verbiage I was just trying to work on, because there are so many moving parts and details that in order for it to really work, it has to be embedded in the foundation of what the staff do as a first assessment of what are we working on, what does it look like, and what does it cost.
So one thing, Chair, if I can, just as a point of order, so we do have a motion on the table and a second.
And we're
So-
discussing.
So I just want to make sure, are you discussing, or are you suggesting that a motion be changed, which technically it can't be,
Unless someone wants to withdraw a motion,
unless somebody wants to withdraw?
Or
a motion
amend.
fails.
or amend, I guess.
Well, I mean, we don't really have, I mean, maybe you typed it out, but I don't know what the exact language is that we're voting on. Unless it's like verbatim, you know, for what was said.
It would be what he said.
Can you
yeah,
read
yeah.
it back?
Well, I don't know if I got it verbatim, and we have the tape, so luckily we can always go to the
Go to the
tape.
tape.
Just recommend moving forward the CIP pages, which you're seeing in current form, with a strong note that the Park Board would like to see more consideration on DEI for all projects, is what I had written down.
And to
What-
clarify,
Go ahead.
to clarify, we're talking about not only accessibility for disabled people of various kinds, but also equity in terms of lower income areas of the city are getting equal access to parks and
Which we've seen in the post plan had highlighted kind of the
Yep.
distribution of our parks. One of my things is, and I think you're probably correct, Caleb, that the city hasn't probably met your standard of how high the bar should be. But I'm also a little cautious because it sounds like there's a tool that you guys use that we don't know anything about or see. So there may be more in the planning than we've been exposed to that takes into account those objectives and goals. But I have a feeling that there could be more still. Strong feeling, probably. I mean, just the fact that we've never had Jace come and talk with us, or Jace hasn't come around and talked with us, would say, you know, there's an opportunity there for evangelizing the role. So we have a motion and a second. I don't hear anything. Do we vote on this at this point? Okay.
All right. Hanley.
approve.
Lehrman.
Approve.
Schultz.
Approve.
Samirsky.
Approve.
Vitale.
Approve.
And Chair Ingraham.
Approve.
Okay, motion passes.
Good points.
Can I make another motion?
Sure, I guess you can.
I would like to recommend that staff create a Parks for All type comprehensive plan, a la the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation comprehensive plan for you know, a long-term future. That could be in the realm of how these comprehensive plans have worked for the city, like 10-year, 15-year, 25-year, whatever those typical timing metrics are. To, again, make this, to embed this, integrate this, weave this into what the city is doing going forward.
So if I can, just check with other staff. Typically, when we have a request by the park board to do some kind of study or some kind of plan, funding would have to be allocated for that. So I suppose a request or motion could be that there is a CIP page added to allocate funds for some kind of planning effort or frame development of a plan.
Could I offer an opportunity or a suggestion too? Since we have a lot of new members and also existing members, it's been a while. Would it be appropriate, or would another approach be to maybe at our next meeting to have staff sort of, I won't say represent, but to provide an overview of the post plan with focus on how those things affect, and then we can calibrate. Do we need a whole new plan, or do we need to look at the post plan? with, to beef up certain sections or beef up, because I just, Parks for All kind of is at the core of what the post plan kind of was trying to do in its own language of 3 years ago or whatever. So it might just be useful to everyone to see that and then go, oh, hey, it's perfect, or more likely, in 3 years some things have changed and we need to amend these sections.
Yeah. Probably
Yeah,
better.
but also to follow up with the trail improvement plan and the park improvement plan, which I understand are separate from the post, or are those inclusive subsets of the post?
The post led to those items.
Post
So
is-
the
post
post
is
said
big.
master plan with these goals, we're doing the
Here are
master.
the goals.
The post, I view the post kind of as a big umbrella.
So the post is inclusive of the trail improvement plan and the park investment plan? That's my question, yes or no? Or are they
Not the
separate?
trail improvement plan, that's before the post plan.
That started
It's
earlier.
unrelated to the parks, that's multimodal connections throughout the city.
View that as connectivity. I mean, personally, I would view that as pure connectivity. How we execute it could be,
Right.
but the
So-
main dollars are connectivity.
So then I would say if it's not inclusive of the post, then it should be, it should undergo the same equity review or equity rewrite.
It might be.
And
worth-
that's why I would say a comprehensive plan that is a Parks for All, equity in the parks focus, that might integrate the post, the trail improvement, and the park improvement plan into a single vehicle. That, or each of those are reviewed under a CIP funding to ensure that it is a comprehensive plan with a equity foundation.
Dan, did you have a comment too?
It might be worth meeting with Jace to actually work with, to develop a framework to how do we implement what you're suggesting. Versus making that decision now, say, we want to make a CIP page without knowing all of it. So it might be worth having those meetings with Jace and develop a framework of how, what needs to be looked at, how do we go about the process to even say what we're going to have as a guidance for creating a CIP.
And we could certainly do an overview of the post plan, which is that big umbrella system guiding document, and have Jace come and talk to the park board and maybe try to connect some dots.
And we don't need a motion for that.
No, we don't need a motion for
Yeah.
that, no.
And simply a better assessment of what we're doing currently. I mean, we do build a lot of our processes around making sure materials are available in numerous languages, for instance, and a better assessment of what we're doing currently to tee up the conversation.
So moving forward with the CIP, going to meet, Jace come and talk with us, and you guys will give an overview of the post plan with the emphasis on how you do or don't effectively incorporate those goals.
Yep, we can definitely do that.
Okay. So now we're on to, I think, let's have more discussion on to 7B.
Yes. And this will be met.
This part has pictures,
Does have pictures. Colorful pictures.
not just spreadsheets.
So as referenced in the CIP, we've been creating restoration and maintenance plans for specific parks. This is through the Natural Resources Master Plan process that helped us prioritize restoration goals and strategies. The restoration and maintenance plans are essentially deeper dives into specific parks. So we've been rolling these out over the last few years. These are developed by staff working closely with local volunteers, the folks in the field doing that work. So there's a bit of a review process, and really these are roadmaps to begin performing the restoration and coordinating between our buckets of input. So we have our volunteers, we have contractors through the CIP dollars, and then we have staff time. So this presentation is meant to be an overview of that process. So as I mentioned, it came out of the Natural Resources Master Plan. Really what we're doing is focusing our efforts in these parks on specific, what I'll refer to as target plant communities, and I'll get into those. The three presented tonight are Big Willow, Jadana, and Green Circle Park. So they're all separate documents. So the idea is to present an overall restoration vision. Really, these are management tools. We're directing staff and volunteers, working with them in the field, what they're going to be doing, and then we're creating separate scopes and contractor-specific tasks and budgeting and reviewing those and making sure that those processes and strategies align with these documents. Really, I can't stress this enough, restoration is a process. It's not an end result. We can say we're trending towards some target plant community. We're going to try to incorporate these plants in it, but restoration's a process. We take it year by year, season by season. We get droughts, we get new insects, we get diseases. We learn through science that different techniques, different seed mixes are more effective. So really I want to stress that these are meant to be living documents. Ideally somebody would look back 10 years from now and say, okay, this is what they planned on doing then. These things are working, these things aren't. We're going to adjust as necessary. So can't really stress that enough. We do leverage the volunteer community early and often. Really, they're boots on the ground in a lot of cases. There's hundreds and thousands of hours put into these parks in a lot of these locations. And then throughout this process, we make sure that the folks around those parks that maybe aren't totally dialed into the restoration effort have a chance to see these. They might say, hey, why did you mow down that perfectly green plant? And that's our opportunity to explain what buckthorn is and why we're doing these restoration works. So really, folks walk in the park and maybe they're not dialed in. These are good sort of layperson level documents to explain our restoration strategies. So really, what we do is identify a target plant community. So this is sort of the ideal conditions. In a perfect world, this would be what we're assessing in the field and then sort of trending towards some particular plant community. We give it an overarching name. We have some prescriptive elements that would get us towards that plant community, but understanding there's a lot of pressures out there. So existing conditions, the surrounding land uses, the general park visibility, we like to restore where folks can see our input, they can see our money being well spent. We strategize areas of high ecological diversity already, so we want to enhance those and protect those first. And then we certainly understand ongoing climate change and the pressures related that come along with that. So broadly, the restoration maintenance plans have maps and then descriptions for each target plant community. I don't plan on getting into those in particular tonight. But Big Willow, for instance, is one of our major parks. It has had substantially improved areas through volunteer efforts. We have an amazing park steward and the group out there putting in a lot of long hours making buckthorn piles for us, seeding native seed mixes these days, so we've evolved that volunteer process so they're seeing things grow, not just extracting plants. The key target plant communities out here are a oak savanna, a mixed savanna, and then we have a lot of general oak woodland out there. So we have a lot of tall red oaks. We have a lot of aspen coming in. The park is bisected by the railroad corridor, which adds some impact to it. There's a lot of topography. There's an old homestead, which is the key node where the volunteers have been working significantly. And we have the creek corridor through here. So a really key ecological corridor that we want to enhance the habitat around.
Can you talk about the areas that are dashed yellow lines? I didn't see that in the key, I didn't know what that was.
Yes, so those are what we're calling, those are our priority work areas. That's where we're going to start. So we're going to start in those locations and push out. So generally, those are represented by areas where they're adjacent to volunteer work or existing conditions, and we want to expand those. Or, for instance, in the case of Big Willow, they're along the creek corridor. So we just know a lot of animals, birds, move up and down that corridor. We'd certainly want to enhance the ecology around those. And then, frankly, it's very aesthetically pleasing to see these restorations go in. You can stand on the bridge in Big Willow and look down the creek and see the buckthorn pushed back and see plant communities be established over the years.
And there's currently already a fair amount of work going on in that lower Oak Savannah area, isn't there?
Yes, so there were
That one,
homes
yeah.
here. We've recently done some forestry mowing in there to knock down the buckthorn. But the key volunteers have worked in,
There.
there was a mansion here
Yep.
decades and decades ago. There's still some stone and brick bollards out in
Yep.
the field there. But the park stewards have worked diligently and pushed this Oak Savannah north, and the goal would be to really open this into a true Oak Savannah, so limited canopy for grass and forbs on the ground plane to establish conditions where we can do continual prescribed burns through there as a management feature. So Big Willow, very spectacular, and as mentioned previously, we're undergoing master planning this year, so this restoration document will sort of be a backbone to that conversation. So that process will be an opportunity to explain what we're doing in terms of restoration in Big Willow. Jadana Park, very popular park, but a bit of a pocket. It's got these two islands, so Hickory Island and what we call Picnic Island. There's actually the long linear blue feature down the middle here was an airstrip that was built in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, yep. Yeah, so there, unfortunately, that sort of, the road out to the island, Picnic Island, was a man-made feature, and the airstrip was a human-made feature, so there's a lot of disturbance that's gone on out there, and that's led to a lot of invasive species over the years. It is along the creek corridor, which is extremely valuable, but the geology on this site is really what makes it unique. These are glacial outwash features, they're stone and gravelly, they're elevated off the creek corridor out of the wetland. The oak hickory woodland is specifically very majestic and beautiful. It's somewhat preserved and has undergone staff-led restoration for decades at this point, and it's really a gem. It's tricky to get out there. You got to go on the right wetland conditions here in the winter. There's some deer paths out there, but otherwise that's sort of protected it, so it's a bit of a gem, but it is considered part of Jadana Park. So we would continue to restore that oak hickory woodland out there. It's almost closed canopy, but it's really spectacular.
So from what I gather, there's enough deer pressure that it's a problem?
There's a lot of deer pressure. If you look at the aerial images of the wetlands, there's trails all over the place. They do, Three Rivers performed deer survey this year, and they look in the wetlands to see the deers. That's where they hide out.
So we need more dogs out there.
Plenty of dogs.
Yeah.
My mic's off. I'm sure it got picked up.
Picnic Island has this beautiful picnic grounds. There's mature oaks, but there is some concern about the pressures of that foot traffic and that picnic use out there. So we want to, consider the impacts of that day use during the summer, and continue oak woodland restoration along the wetland edge, in this pretty spectacular island out there. So the bones are in place. Enhancing the ground plane with increased diversity, removing particular plants that pressure the enhancement of that diversity, adding native seeds and potentially even containerized or bare root species in the future of these woody species, yes.
In the Jadana packet, you talked about it's not possible to restore back to pre-settlement. It doesn't say that in any of the other ones, and I'm not sure why we can't.
There is another park where there's a reference to some part of the park. I can't remember which part. Yeah.
Often we make These target plan communities are based on the existing conditions and what is realistic in terms of
Yeah, that's.
restoration. So
I'm good with that. It's not stated in any of the other ones, and it sounds sort of like, I don't know.
good note. We can
you
take a
could
look
take
at
it
that.
out, I'd
Yeah,
be
sure.
happy,
We would
but-
certainly want to be consistent with that type of language. It's important language.
Just seems overly negative to me.
I thought in Big Willow, there's a reference somewhere in Big Willow to a similar issue
Okay.
with a loose purple,
So specifically related to the wetlands,
Phragmites
we do.
and- Yeah.
Yeah.
that's-
We do somewhat say the wetlands
Yeah,
would be
in-
too much for us to
yeah,
take on.
Big Willow had the same reference.
Okay, well, good note.
Before you leave this chart, I'll call it the Cargill Trail. Is that just off the top of the page? Are there,
This is Mooney Park right up here.
yeah, but I mean the trail that goes along the Cargill property.
Part of Mooney Park.
Okay, but is it, it's
right
not,
off the
it's
map.
off the top of the page?
Yeah.
It's not part of Jadana.
No, I know that, but I'm just trying to, proximity.
Yes,
It's over the edge
It's
of the
right
page.
under the word Jadana there.
Okay,
It
that's what I
kind of
thought.
jogs down through here.
Okay.
So why is Picnic Island called an island? I wasn't aware of it. I mean, I've
That's
walked
just
out there. I just-
anecdotally what we've called it,
Okay.
because it's surrounded by wetland.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, okay.
It's an isthmus.
Thank you. That makes more sense.
It is, correct.
Okay, sorry, I carry on.
And finally, Green Circle Park, this is an opus. There's certainly a lot of commercial property around here. This is actually a man-made pond, but it is a highly used trail system through here and the future park improvements, making this site important in terms of restoration. There's a fairly well-kept and restored prairie. There are some challenges with weeds along the wetland edge that staff have been working on and looking to enhance. There's a quite beautiful gazebo with a sort of a mixed savanna wrapping around it. So a true local amenity for the folks that live and work near this area. But it is truly an urban park. It has the pressures of the urban features and the stormwater impacts on this pond. The stormwater raises and lowers the water level in this pond, making conditions along the wetland edge difficult for restoration. But because it's so visible, it's worth investing in and enhancing the plant communities out there as best as we can.
From an equity standpoint, there's a lot of people that live in apartments near
Yep.
there, so it gives them some nature. I noticed that it talked about the Mayor's Monarch Prairie.
Yep.
Do we need to do anything to that prairie to make sure it still has milkweeds in it?
We certainly protect the milkweed and we enhance it. It goes in our seed mixes often. And those monarch way stations are very important for our accounting of our process in terms of supporting the monarch. So yes, absolutely. Full sun out here. The good bones for the restoration to continue.
And if the planets and stars align, would the park that's added to Opus be anywhere somehow connected to this?
It's right off the map down here.
Yeah.
It's southwest of here. So this pond that's just in the bottom would be on the eastern edge of that new park.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in theory, there's some near future where we're beginning to restore around this pond buffer and creating that connection of restoration between Green Circle Park and this new park.
Technically, parking for this park is all in commercial locations,
There's a
right?
few stalls
Right
along
there, I know, but
Green
it's right
Circle
along there.
Drive right here.
Yeah.
But yes, this is apartments right here and a lot of commercial, so
Yeah.
it's used daily.
When I was in there last summer, I wasn't really paying too much attention to what the surface of the trails is. A lot of the circles are paved. Are those paved or are they?
Yeah.
Yep, they're paved. They're all asphalt through
Yeah.
there. We are doing a wayfinding plan currently that'll help you navigate through there. The trails are a little circuitous, labyrinth-like. But yeah, there's a bridge that crosses here, so important to demonstrate the restoration as you cross the waterway there. So, feedback and any questions or concerns about the restoration and maintenance plans for Big Willow, Green Circle, and Jadana Parks? I'm happy to bring back any page up for you.
I think these look great. These are all great parks and very worthy of this restoration. I think it's great.
Typically, we like to come back later in the year and give updates of what the restoration is looking like, who the contractors are, how we've benefited from the volunteer work. So we've done that in the past for Purgatory and Hillaway Park, so we plan on doing that moving forward here too.
And you had said that these were developed by staff?
The plans were.
Plans.
Correct.
Okay.
Initially, the Natural Resources Master Plan and then the first version of these, we did have consultant help, but we've since turned that into a template so we can sort of get these out with staff and volunteer input relatively quickly without reinventing the wheel. And then there's a consistency between these particular planning documents.
To me, it seemed a little bit like Jadana was written by somebody else, but I guess it doesn't matter too much. So.
Staff product.
With the you know, the Opus has changed so much. When Green Circle was originally done, was that the city originally, or was that Opus that did that?
Good question. I don't know the history. I would imagine it was
Opus, probably.
Yeah, it was built as part of the development there.
And so back when they did all that, it was really all office occupancy, and now we have a ton of, I think you mentioned, a ton of apartments there.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what the population of the apartments are in terms of age, but their families are older. I know some of them are older, but they're not all of them. And so I'm kind of curious. Kind of to Caleb's point earlier is if the Big Buck Park were to be too far down the road or a bridge too far, is the population of the community there such that Green Circle should be looked at differently in the future, because there really aren't kid amenities at all? And I'm not talking playgrounds or anything, but it's really designed for. I got a half an hour break at lunchtime. I'm going to walk around the ponds. That would seem something worth thinking about. That's not a restoration project, but a park project.
Certainly when we look at the design of the new park, we'd take into context the surrounding amenities. What are those connective tissues that we can utilize or leverage?
Okay. That was good work. I learned where the largest Silversberry tree is.
What?
Largest Silversberry tree in Minnetonka. Read closely, you'll find out where.
Go check it out.
Good. Any other comments or questions? So does that mean we're on to reports from staff?
Yes, and we have 2 items to provide updates on. One is the off-leash dogs, and one is Oberlin and Covington Park. So I think Matt is taking the first one.
Yep. So after the May 19th City Council meeting, staff was directed to develop conceptual off-leash dog areas for Purgatory Park. These would, specifically we got direction to develop 2 options, one of approximately 25 acres and one of approximately 45 acres. We are performing a feasibility level concept design for this, looking at the practical nature of the site, topography concerns. I've been meeting with fencing contractors about the practicality of getting fence and what the gates could look like and the costs related to those features. So the idea would be in 60 days of May 19th, that'll put us later in July, to present to the City Council those 2 concepts of approximately those acreages, and including the cost estimates related to those and particular concerns, pros and cons of the various areas we were directed to design concepts for.
And so that will not be coming back to the park board. It'll go directly to the city council, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And you have the next one?
And will the Is staff using the guidelines that came out of the working group?
Correct, yes.
As
So
much
we'll
as
be
possible.
referring to that as much as possible, that these are the characteristics that this particular area meets or does not meet of the criteria. I have another one?
You do.
Oh, boy.
And then there's
Oh,
pickleball,
Is it?
Yeah.
Oberlin Park.
Oh, that's right, yes, yes, yes.
It's
Where
a
is
small one.
You-
Oh, it went away.
No,
It's not mine.
It's on mine too.
Okay, well, I got it. locked in.
Basically, Oberlin wants
Yes.
pickleball and Covington doesn't.
Correct. So we hosted an open house back in the spring. We got concerned about the noise of pickleball, so we've been looking at existing tennis courts that are due to be resurfaced or we would consider to install pickleball lines. We looked at Oberlin as a special request, and Covington, which was due to be resurfaced. The neighbors around Covington were concerned, the typical concerns with pickleball, the noise and the parking. It's a very popular sport. So Covington will remain tennis only. It's currently being resurfaced and new lines will go down, but it will be a tennis court. But we did hear significant interest in pickleball lines at Oberlin Park, which is in the northeast corner of the city. A lot of apartments and townhomes around there. But there was interest in installing pickleball lines on the existing tennis surface. So with the tennis-sized net, pickleball lines added. So we were able to get some more pickleball in.
All right, and I will talk about upcoming meetings. So if you remember, we do not have a meeting in July, so we will skip July. The next regularly scheduled meeting is on August 6th. We are planning on hosting a training prior to the regular meeting, so that would be during the dinner hour. This would be a training with our city attorney, our new city attorney.
So we should all be at dinner on time.
Yes,
Okay.
if you can make it, dinner on time, and it will be actually in this room. So we'll eat in this room while he's providing you with information. The two topics are open meeting law and data practices, and then any other questions that you guys have. So that will be at 5:15 here in Minnehaha, and then the regular meeting will start at 6 p.m.
Do we
And-
think we could get Jace for that meeting too?
For the regular meeting?
Yeah.
I will certainly ask and see if that fits in his schedule. I already have Eric, our attorney, scheduled for the pre-meeting meeting for the training. So he's ready to go.
And I would just urge everyone to try to be there for that training session, because it is complicated.
It is
rules are
complicated, yes.
complicated.
More complicated than you think,
Yeah.
perhaps. And then in September, we typically host a joint park board meeting with the city council. So this is, basically, it's a park board meeting, but the city council is in attendance. So it's the park board's schedule or agenda, not the council's, if that makes sense. We typically have a meeting for about 1 hour, and then we will go on a tour. So right now, we haven't discussed internally on sites of interest for that tour. If you have any interest of seeing specific places or parks or amenities, please let me know, and we can certainly consider that as part of the tour. Right. That's as far as we plan. Yes.
So just a question on that joint meeting. You mentioned like the first hour is basically our typical agenda and it's short.
Yes.
So as a new member, I didn't interpret that meeting in the same way given some of my other experience working within cities and this sort of volunteer space. When is there a time that the park board and the city council kind of discuss subsequent work plans or strategic priorities for future timelines that allow us for dialogue, let's say from park board to city council back? So we have 1 hour to do that.
That's the joint meeting where the park board can directly discuss items with the city council.
And then if both for that meeting but any other meeting, again for my newness, what is the process to have a specific agenda item to request a specific agenda item for a meeting, as well as provide you with
For our
information for the packet.
For this, for your regular
For a
meetings?
park board meeting, inclusive of that September meeting.
So, the park board as a whole certainly can bring up ideas for agenda items if you'd like to see something. It's, typically it's not one park board member asking staff to do something. We like to see a consensus among the park board. It doesn't necessarily need to be a formal motion. If that is helpful, you can certainly do that. But for us, and just to manage our time and workloads, we would need to hear from the park board as a whole if a specific agenda item should be brought to the park board.
Usually that's part of the agenda on the August meeting. So the month before we say, okay, what do we
Right.
want to talk to city council about? Because
Right.
it's a once
Yes.
a year opportunity for us.
Yes. Yep.
So we can include that in our
Yep.
agenda.
Okay. And then we have other meetings and activities. Kelly, do you want to talk about that?
So is there no October, there are November and December meetings, or just no content yet?
We
correct?
just don't have content yet.
But there's no October meeting.
There is, October 22nd.
But it says delayed.
To that date.
Oh, delayed June. Oh, okay, got it, thank you.
So
Thank you.
Yom Kippur is
That's
January
okay, I didn't read it correctly.
I did want to point out, in August, since we were talking about the Cullen Nature Preserve, I forgot to mention the master plan that Matt talked about, having a draft copy of, that we will also bring that at that August meeting.
Right.
So we have that tentatively scheduled right now.
Yeah, other activities, it's June, so we're busy. First Farmers Market was yesterday over at the Marsh, so the first one at the Marsh had almost 600 people. So actually pretty good attendance for when it rained up until 2 o'clock and it was kind of gloomy the rest of the day. So Farmers Market Tuesdays over at the Marsh. We got Music in the Park coming. Shady Oak Beach opens this Saturday, and then we end June with Summerfest. So a lot of activities coming in June. Busy month.
Are you open to entertaining? My thing won't stay on. Are you open to entertaining places to go for the tour? So maybe Cullen. Not everybody here has been to Cullen, probably, and maybe Glen Lake.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we can.
Or, or also consider if out of the off-leash discussion, some other areas come up. That would be something to
Oh,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
too.
That's,
But those are good ones.
yeah.
Cullen, we were out, what, last year?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like going there.
So the new people haven't seen it.
No.
And
Yeah, it's just whether it's new to the city council change since
Yeah.
maybe
Oh.
one person.
Yeah.
It's thinking about what they need
Yeah.
to see to help further our
Yes.
agenda
Yeah.
for the next year,
Yeah.
or to show successes that we've had.
oh, and
'Cause
another
we
idea.
were at Glen Lake last year, weren't we?
Yeah.
Did we?
I think it was last year or 2 years ago.
It was
When
last
we were
year.
looking at skate parks, we were there.
We've done it a couple
Yeah.
times.
We've done
all
there
right.
They're
twice.
still good ideas, they're still good ideas.
So, and another thought would be the new parcels along Minnetonka
Big
Boulevard.
Willow,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Big Willow extension.
I agree with that. Okay, anything else on the
Food for thought.
information? Otherwise, we have park board member reports. Does anybody have any reports?
I went to a tour with Friends of Minnetonka Parks of Big Willow Park, and they've done lots of work. It looks, the parts that they've worked on look really great. So it's the process is working as far as restoration.
Yeah, there's a lot of good progress been made in all of our parks, but Big Willow is really a beautiful park. I just make a comment. After the, whatever that was, April city council meeting, I wasn't able to attend, but I watched it, and there was clearly, and I don't know how many people watched it or were able to attend, but there was clearly,
Talking about May, you mean?
huh?
The May one?
Well, the May was a special, it was May
It was
too.
May,
They were
yeah.
both in May. They both in May. Yeah, the May actual council meeting, it was clear that there was some confusion around what was in the original Purgatory Master Plan and kind of how the Park Board made its decision of our recommendation to them. And I did write a note to City Manager Mike Funk, who distributed it to the City Council, just to kind of clarify the basis that we made the decision on, the fact that the master plan did include areas that were marked as off-leash areas that they did approve, and kind of again explain the rationale that given that was a 15-month project, it wasn't a short-term effort. It was a pretty extensive 15-month project by staff and the Park Board, and with a tremendous amount of public input. And so for us to kind of overlook that level of input and planning seemed kind of precipitous in the time frame, and that's why we did, we kind of went with what had already been approved. And I think that helped a little bit, because I think clearly there was confusion around that. So that's the only thing I had to report.
I was at that meeting, Dave, and it was an amazing public forum.
Yeah.
And I was there for about 3.5 hours of the 4.5 hours. You guys stayed longer. And I think our input and our comments ultimately were incorporated in a thoughtful way. And I think we made some good recommendations and suggestions that ultimately got absorbed. But it was unbelievable amount of public commentary and very feisty. But
Well, you can go back to the archives and review last year's public comment sessions on the master plan, if you want to see feisty.
Good.
somebody said the best line at that event, said that people come out for barking and parking.
Yeah, that's my fun, yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
really funny.
That's the city manager.
Yeah, oh Mike, yeah.
Great, well, good discussion. Anybody, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain another motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
We don't have to actually do roll, do we?
All in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.